The wind howled through the broken shutters, rattling against the fragile wood of the small cabin. Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It was thin, worn, like everything else in her life. The fire in the hearth had gone out hours ago. She hadn't the strength or the wood to keep it alive. Her fingers trembled as she held the letter. Creased, smudged, read too many times to count. It was the only light in her darkness, the only hope in a world that had given her so little. She whispered to herself the words she knew by heart. A respectable gentleman, 32 years of age, seeking a bride of good character to share in the labor and life of the western frontier. Travel expenses paid, room and board guaranteed, a future promised. Her lips trembled as the final words left her. A future promised. 2 words that meant everything. And yet, nothing certain at all. Her parents were gone, taken by fever in the spring. Her sister had married and moved away. Her brother had debts too heavy to even look at her. And Clara? She had nothing but her pride, and that pride was starving her. The neighbors offered pity. The church offered bread, but no one offered her a life. Her eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There, written in strong, deliberate script, was a name. Mr. Thomas Hale. A stranger. A man who could be kind or cruel, honorable or dangerous. She didn't know. She couldn't know. And yet, her hand trembled not with fear, but with longing. The ad had reached her by accident. A crumpled newspaper left behind in the market stall. She'd smoothed it open with curiosity, and something inside her, some desperate flame, ignited. She told herself she wouldn't answer. That was madness. But loneliness has a way of stripping reason bare. That night, she had taken a scrap of paper, dipped her pen in ink, and written words she never thought she'd write. She had promised she was willing, that she was capable, that she was ready to be his wife. She sealed it with shaking hands, walked barefoot through the cold streets, and dropped the letter into the post. Now weeks had passed, and with them, her fear had grown. Would he write back? Would he choose her? Or would silence be her only answer? Then, at last, a reply, a letter written with simple honesty, a ticket enclosed, and a single line at the end. If you are willing to gamble on me, Clara, then I will gamble on you. She pressed her hand to her heart, felt the thud of it, heavy. A gamble. Yes, that was what it was. To leave behind all she had ever known. To board a train that would carry her across endless miles. To stand before a man she had never seen and call him husband. But what choice did she have? The roof was leaking. The cupboard was bare. Winter was coming. Hope was all she had left. And so, in the quiet of her cabin, she whispered a vow. I will take the risk. I will take the gamble. Whatever lies ahead, it must be better than this. The dawn would come soon, and with it, the beginning of her journey. Her hand tightened around the letter. Her eyes lifted to the fading stars. And Clara, the girl with nothing, prepared to wager her heart on a stranger. The train whistle pierced the dawn air, a lonely sound, carrying Clara's heart along with it. She stood on the platform, ticket clutched tight in her glove. Her one-way passage into the unknown. The letter from Thomas Hale lay folded in her satchel. She carried it close, as if the words themselves were a lifeline. The journey was long, dust on her skirts, cold seeping through the windows of the rattling carriage. Each turn of the wheels carried her farther from the familiar, from her town, from her memories, from the ghosts of her parents and the silence of her empty home. And yet, every mile was also carrying her closer, closer to him. At night, when the train quieted, Clara unfolded the letter once more. Her lantern burned low, casting trembling shadows across the words. She read them slowly, carefully, as though his voice might rise from the page. Miss Clara, I am no poet. I am no dreamer. I am only a man who has worked this land with my hands. It is a hard place, a lonely place. I do not ask for love at first sight. I ask only for honesty, for kindness, for a willingness to try. Her lips pressed together as she reread the final line. If you're willing to gamble on me, then I will gamble on you. Simple, stark, and yet it carried a weight. He had not promised her riches, not even happiness, only the chance of it. A gamble, That word echoed in her chest again and again. The other passengers whispered stories. A woman with weary eyes leaned close one evening, speaking in hushed tones. "You're traveling alone?" "Yes," Clara said softly. "Then be careful. Men out west, they're not like men here. They carry shadows with them. And some shadows don't let go." Clara's heart stuttered at the warning, but she kept her chin high. She couldn't turn back. Not now. She thought of Thomas Hale. Who was he? A strong hand? A cruel fist? A widower? A liar? Or perhaps a man as desperate as she was? A man clinging to hope the way she clung to his words. The countryside outside the window grew wilder as the days passed. Civilization fell away. Fields turned to plains, plains to mountains, mountains to endless sky. Clara pressed her forehead to the glass. She tried to picture his face. Was he tall, broad, kind-eyed, or haunted? She would know soon enough. On the final night of her journey, she dreamed. She dreamed of standing in a doorway. A man's shadow stretched before her. His hand reached out, but the light behind him was broken, half in sun, half in darkness. When she woke, her heart raced, and for the first time, doubt struck hard. What if she had been wrong? What if her gamble would cost her everything? But as the morning sun rose, and the conductor's voice rang out announcing her stop, Clara gathered her satchel, pressed the letter one last time to her chest, and whispered, "Thomas Hale, whoever you are, I am here." She stepped down onto the dirt of a new world. The frontier air-sharp, the sky vast and merciless. And somewhere ahead, waiting, was the stranger who had written her name for the first time. The frontier town was smaller than Clara imagined. A scattering of buildings, wooden facades weathered by dust and wind. The air carried scents she wasn't used to. Smoke, horses, and something raw, untamed. Men in broad hats stood along the street. Their eyes lingered too long, weighing, measuring. Clara tightened her shawl around her shoulders. She felt like a lamb in a land of wolves. Her boots crunched on dirt as she stepped forward. Every sound magnified. Every shadow stretched long in the afternoon light. Her satchel felt heavier now. The letter inside no longer a promise, but a question. Who is he? What kind of man am I walking toward? A stagecoach rattled past, raising dust that clung to her hem. The driver called out, laughing at some crude joke. The town was alive with noise. Hammers striking nails, wagons creaking, children darting through alleys. But underneath it all, there was an unease, like the air itself was holding its breath. Clara approached the small inn where she had been told to wait. The sign swung on rusted hinges. Its paint faded, its letters nearly gone. She pushed open the door. The room smelled of ale, smoke, and sweat. Heads turned. Men stared. And for a heartbeat, silence hung thick. Her cheeks flushed. She looked down, clutching her satchel as though it were a shield. The innkeeper, a broad woman with graying hair, bustled forward. "You must be the one," she said, not unkindly. Her voice was rough from years of shouting over noise. Clara nodded. "Yes, I'm waiting for Mr. Thomas Hale." The woman's eyes flickered, a glance too quick to read. But something passed there, a shadow. "He'll come," the innkeeper said. Then she turned away, leaving Clara with the weight of that glance. The hours dragged. Clara sat near the window, the dust-glazed glass framing the fading sun. She watched men ride by. She watched women hurry home. She watched the town slowly surrender to night. And still, he did not come. Her heart beat louder with each moment. What if he had changed his mind? What if he had written to another woman? What if he was never coming at all? Then the door creaked open. A figure filled the threshold. Tall, broad-shouldered, a shadow cut against the glow of the street lamps outside. Clara's breath caught. The man stepped inside, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with dust and sun. His eyes gray as storm clouds, searching, piercing, until they found her. He stopped. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then his jaw tightened, and he gave a slow nod. "Miss Clara." Her throat tightened. Her voice came out barely more than a whisper. "Yes, Thomas Hale, the stranger from the letter." The man who now stood before her, her husband-to-be, he was not what she expected. There was strength in him, but also something else, something guarded, a heaviness in his gaze, as though he carried the weight of things unsaid. He extended a hand, large, calloused, the hand of a man who had worked the land and perhaps fought for it. Clara hesitated, then placed her hand in his. Warmth, solidness, a spark of something she couldn't name. "Let's get you home," he said softly. But beneath the softness was steel. Clara rose, clutching her satchel. Her heart trembled with hope and unease. For though she was stepping into his life, she could not ignore the shadows that clung to him, shadows that whispered. His past was not buried. Not at all. The ride from town was long, longer than Clara expected. The wagon wheels creaked as they cut across the endless dark plain. The stars overhead burned cold and sharp, like watchful eyes. Thomas sat beside her, reins loose in his hands. He didn't speak much, only a few short words. "Cold tonight. Hold tight," and silence after. Clara stole glances at him when she dared. The lines of his face, strong, carved by years in the sun. His jaw was square, his mouth firm, and his eyes, those gray eyes seemed to see too much. There was no boy in him, only a man, and a man who had seen things he did not say. At last, the homestead appeared, a dark outline against the night. A house built of timber and grit, not large, not delicate, but sturdy like its owner. The porch sagged at one end. The windows glowed, faint with lamplight. Smoke curled from the chimney. It looked like a place meant to endure storms. And yet, Clara shivered. He helped her down from the wagon, his hand steady on her arm. Gentle, but beneath the gentleness, she felt something else. Control, restraint, as though he carried a temper, chained tightly inside. "Welcome home," he said simply. Home. The word pressed against her ribs. Strange, heavy. Could this place, this man, ever be that? Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and pine. The walls were plain, bare except for a rifle mounted above the hearth. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf lined with tools, not books. It was not unfriendly, but it was not soft either. This was a house for surviving, not for dreaming. He set her satchel down. "You'll take the room at the back." His voice low, steady. Clara nodded. She followed the small hallway to a narrow room. A bed, neatly made. A washstand. Nothing more. Yet she touched the quilt with trembling fingers. It was clean, warm, and, for the first time in months, she felt safe enough to exhale. Later, she joined him at the table. He poured her water, broke bread, passed her a bowl of stew that smelled of herbs and smoke. For long moments, they ate in silence. Only the crackle of the fire filled the room. Finally, Clara spoke. "Thank you for answering my letter." His eyes lifted to hers. A flicker, something unspoken, crossed his face. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. Clara's breath caught. In that single moment, the hardness of him slipped, and beneath it, she glimpsed the man. Not the stranger, not the shadow, but a man who longed, perhaps as desperately as she did, not to be alone. Her heart softened. She wanted to ask him more, about his past, about the weight in his eyes. But his gaze dropped to his bowl. His shoulders tightened. The wall went back up, and Clara felt the question die on her tongue. When the fire burned low, he rose. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be long." She nodded, but as she lay in the small bed, staring at the dark ceiling, her mind would not quiet. She felt his presence in the next room. Solid, near, and yet distant. Her heart fluttered with something she could not name. Attraction, fear, curiosity. Outside, the wind moaned against the walls. The house creaked, and Clara knew this was only the beginning. She had stepped into his world, and though she felt the warmth of him, she also felt the shadows pressing close. The days that followed were a blur of labor. The homestead demanded it. Thomas worked from dawn until the sun bled into the horizon, chopping wood, mending fences, driving cattle across the field. Clara tried to match his pace. She cooked, she washed, she tended to the chickens and swept the rooms until her hands ached. Yet no matter what she did, she felt his watchful eyes. Not cruel, not unkind, but guarded, always guarded. When he spoke, it was of simple things. The weather, the land, what needed to be done tomorrow. Never of himself, never before. And the silence, that heavy silence between them, grew louder by the day. One afternoon, Clara walked into town for supplies. The general store was crowded, voices thick with gossip and trade. As she stepped through the door, the room quieted. Eyes turned. Whispers began. She felt them, like prickles against her skin. A woman at the counter leaned close to another, her words barely more than breath. But Clara heard them. That's her, the one who married him. Poor thing doesn't know what he's done. Clara's hand froze on the fabric she had been folding. Her heart thudded. She forced herself to breathe, to straighten her spine, to keep moving. But her ears strained. Every word, every whisper. An older man in the corner muttered into his cup. Hale should have left. Man like him don't deserve a wife. The woman beside him hissed. Quiet fool. You'll bring trouble. Trouble. The word clung to Clara like dust in her lungs. She carried her basket to the counter. The storekeeper's eyes flicked to hers, then quickly away. He wrapped her items in silence. His hands too fast, too tense. And when he passed her the parcel, his words were clipped. Best hurry home. It'll be dark soon. As though darkness itself was a warning. On the walk back, the whispers chased her. They clung to the wind. They curled in the corners of her mind. What has he done? What is he hiding? Her heart warred with itself. She remembered the warmth in his eyes at the table, the softness beneath his steel. But she also remembered the weight, the silence, the shadows he carried in every step. That evening, she found him mending a harness outside. His sleeves rolled, muscles taut with effort. The setting sun painted him gold. He looked almost noble, almost gentle. And yet, Clara's breath caught. For in that moment, she thought of the whispers, the warnings, and she wondered, could hands that looked so strong also be capable of something darker? She tried to speak. T. Thomas. He glanced at her, brows lifting, but the words failed. She couldn't ask. Not yet. His gaze lingered a moment longer, as if sensing her struggle. Then he turned back to his work. The sound of leather straining filled the silence. And Clara's questions burned hotter. That night, as she lay in bed, the wind rattled the shutters. She heard him pacing in the other room. Slow, heavy, a man walking with ghosts. And she knew, whatever his past was, it was not gone. It was here, living in the very walls of this house. And sooner or later, those whispers would no longer stay whispers. The days turned colder. Frost kissed the windows in the mornings. Smoke curled heavy from the chimney. Clara rose before dawn, her breath clouding in the chill air. She worked beside Thomas, hauling water, feeding animals, stacking wood. At first, she thought he would send her back inside, but he did not. He let her labor beside him, equal. And in those small hours of shared silence, something began to shift. One morning, she stumbled, her boot catching on frozen ground. She would have fallen, but his arm caught her. Strong, steady, their eyes met. Gray storm, and her own trembling reflection. For a heartbeat too long, he didn't let go. And she felt it, a warmth she had not expected, a spark buried beneath all his shadows. At night, over dinner, the silence softened. He asked about her family, about the town she'd left behind, about the books she loved as a girl. She told him of her father's old fiddle, of her mother's garden, of the way laughter once filled her home. And he listened, truly listened. The lines of his face eased. The hardness slipped, piece by piece. And Clara found herself wondering, could it be? Could she truly learn to love this man? Yet the whispers still clung. The warnings still echoed. When she walked into town again, voices hushed. A child was pulled close to her mother's skirts. An old man muttered, God help her. And Clara's chest tightened with dread. She longed to ask Thomas, to press him, to tear down the wall of silence he held so tightly. But every time she tried, the words died on her tongue, because she feared the answer. One evening, as snow began to fall, she found him standing by the fire. The lamplight cast shadows across his face. He looked almost sorrowful. She gathered courage. Thomas. Her voice low. I hear things. In town. They whisper about you. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw tightened. He turned slowly, those gray eyes sharp as steel. What do they say? Her breath caught. That you're dangerous. That you've done things. Silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. For a long moment, he said nothing, only stared into the fire. Then his voice came, low and rough. I've made mistakes, Clara. I've seen blood spilled. Done what I had to do to survive. Her heart pounded. Are they right to fear you? He lifted his gaze, and in his eyes she saw it. The storm, the shadow, but also pain, regret. No, he said at last. They're wrong to think I wanted it, but right to know I carry it still. Clara's throat tightened. She should have recoiled. She should have stepped back. Instead, she stepped closer, because she saw the truth behind his words. Not a monster, not a brute, but a man who bore scars deeper than flesh. And against her will, her heart ached for him. That night, as she lay awake in her narrow bed, she pressed a hand to her chest. Two truths warred inside her. One, he was a man with shadows, a man who might bring danger to her doorstep. The other, he was a man she was beginning to care for, a man she wanted to believe in. Her heart was divided, her future uncertain, and the gamble she had taken now felt sharper than ever. The wind tore across the plains that morning, cold and relentless. Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. Her heart pounded, not just from the chill, but from the feeling that something was coming. Something inevitable. The town had sent its whispers ahead, like a warning carried on the frostbitten air. A stranger had come. Questions had been asked. People had spoken of Thomas Hale and of the shadow he carried with him. And now, it seemed that shadow had followed her home. He returned from the barn, boots caked with mud. His face was set, eyes stormy. They're coming, he said simply. Clara's pulse jumped. Who is coming? Thomas's jaw tightened. Men from my past. Men I thought long gone. But they haven't forgotten. The weight of his words pressed on her chest. And for the first time, fear overtook hope. He reached for her hand, rough and strong. Clara, I need you to trust me. She swallowed. Her lips trembled. Thomas, He silenced her with a look. Not cruel, not unkind, but firm. Whatever happens, we face it together. Or not at all. The sound of horses echoed across the plain. Dust rose like smoke in the morning sun. Clara felt it in her bones. The danger, the reckoning. She had a choice. Run, hide, or stand. Her heart beat faster. The gamble, the true gamble, was here. The first rider came into view. A tall man, face hard, eyes full of memory and vengeance. Then another, and another. Thomas moved to meet them, hands steady on the reins. A calculated calm in every movement. Clara followed. Her fingers brushed his. He didn't pull away. Shots rang out. The horses reared. Dust and sweat mixed in the sunburned air. Clara pressed herself against Thomas, her head against his shoulder, her heart wild. And in that chaos, she realized she was not afraid of him. Not anymore. She was afraid of losing him. Thomas's eyes met hers. Gray, stormy, alive with intensity. Stay close, he said. And she did. Every instinct screamed to run. Every fear screamed to flee. But her heart said to stand. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in a blur of danger. When the dust settled, Thomas had faced the men from his past. And though his past had left scars, he was still here, still alive, still whole, still with her. Clara sank to her knees beside him, hands shaking, tears hot on her cheeks. You survived, she whispered. And in his eyes, she saw relief, fear fading, and a soft, hard-earned smile. Yes, he said, because you didn't run. You didn't leave me to face it alone. For the first time, Clara understood. Love was a gamble. Courage was a gamble. Life itself was a gamble. But some gambles were worth every risk. That night, the homestead was quiet. The stars overhead cold and vast. But inside, the fire burned bright. And so did something else. A love born in fear, nurtured in courage, and sealed in trust. Clara sat beside Thomas, her hand in his, and for the first time in her life, she believed in tomorrow. The gamble had been taken, the risk had been faced, and she had won, not just a life with a stranger, but a chance at love she had never dared to hope for.